In this session, we will take a look at another category of elementals, termed as motivational elementals. We started off discussion on the heat model of the mind, and we said the heat model of the mind is based upon the philosophy of open structuralism. It is psychophilosophical in nature. It is modular in nature, can be used in the believer's framework or can be used in secular framework also. We took a look at what are the different categories of elementals, and today we'll focus on this part, one category of elementals known as the motivational elementals. Let us first revise what we saw last time. We said these were the type of elementals. We said all elementals in the heat model can be divided into three categories: structural elementals, process elementals, and freedom elementals. And we took a look at what are the structural elementals in the last session. And in this session, we will start with the second category of elementals called the process elementals. And the process elementals further can be divided into motivational, generic operational, faculty, characteristic, resultant, and accumulative. So the process elementals can be divided further into 6 more subcategory of elementals. Today we will take a look at this one, the category or the subcategory of motivational elementals. And when we say motivational elementals, they are the motivation for doing or not doing something. And as we know, the ultimate motivation for anything is desire with capital D. And this desire expresses itself in hundreds of different small desires. Desire for food, for clothes, for love, for knowledge, for spirituality. All different kinds of desires are the small desires through which this capital desire expresses itself. And these small desires, they operate out of different parts of our psychic system. And these small desires can also, in their generic sense, these small desires in their generic sense can be termed as the motivational elementals. So let us look at what these motivational elementals are. These are the motivational elementals. We can see here the motivational elements, how many in number? 17 in number. This is not an exhaustive list. As we go along and develop the model, some of them may get removed, some of them may get added. Model development always is a work in progress. And especially where we are in terms of knowledge, there is a long way to go. So the motivational elementals are, there is an elemental of fear, anger, pleasure, sexuality, power, love, creativity, aesthetics, expression, knowledge, mysticism, spirituality, evolution, closure, completeness, fulfillment, and inertia. One way to create a list of motivational elementals is to start with the Eastern model of chakras and start from the bottom. Muladhara, Swadhisthana, all the chakras, the earth center, the sexual center, the power center, and so on and so forth. And corresponding to each chakra, there are certain motivational elementals which the chakra is supposed to coordinate. So if we look at survival and two primary emotions related to survival, anger and fear, they are both associated with the root chakra, the base center or Muladhara. In Sanskrit, they call it Muladhara. Similarly, when we come to the second center, the sexual center, or in Sanskrit they call it Swadhisthana, we have pleasure, sexuality, and envy. I have wished I have to add here. That also is related to the sexual center. So the sexual center related to envy, it is related to sexual pleasure, some other pleasure, sexual pleasure, as well as some sort of creativity. So these are the areas which are dealing with the second center. Then we come to the third center, which is center of power, the Muladhara chakra, and then we come to the center of heart, love, then the throat chakra, aesthetics, expression, then the Agnya chakra, knowledge and mysticism, then the seventh chakra, Swadhisthana, the crown chakra, Sahasrara chakra, and that deals with spirituality, evolution. So one way to create a list up to here is to use the chakras philosophy, the chakra model. This also will go in chakra model in the first center. And then when we use ideas like the psychic, we look at completeness, closure. We also look at evolution. So this we can bring in evolution, completeness, fulfillment when we look at the psychic. Closure is related to that component of psychic which is in touch with the emotional nature. So this is one set of motivational elementals. So these are related to our primary, some of our basic desires, and each of them expresses itself in million, 100 million different ways. So for example, we can have anger on 100 things, fear about 100 things. We can derive pleasure in 100 ways from 100 things. We can experience power in 100 different situations. Similarly for all the elementals. All the elementals, these are generic elementals which express themselves in hundreds of different ways in our everyday life. Inside the psyche, even in behavioral terms. So these are the motivational elementals, and they are nothing but different generic forms related to our most generic desires. That if we look at our desires, primarily they are related to anger, pleasure, sexuality, love, creativity. And one of the primary desires is survival, and therefore the fear of death. So this is the first thing that activates in this complete psychic cycle, that at first there is a desire which expresses itself in 100 small desires, and the generic list of those 100 small desires is there. And then this acquires a specific form, that if there is fear, we buy an insurance policy. If there is anger, we watch an aggressive movie. There is a search for pleasure and we search for good packaged food. So in 100 different ways, we satisfy these small generic desires. And these are the motivational elementals. So what happens is, the first thing that happens is either of them get activated. And once either of them gets activated, based upon the strength of the stimulus which activates them, based upon the constitutional strength, based on the deprivation, based upon what you have been thinking for the last few days, based upon the environment and so many other factors, the strength with which these motivational elementals are activated, based upon that strength, affinity is deposited over that chakra which is dealing with this particular element. So if we are looking at, for example, sexuality, and if you see a movie which is exciting this sexuality, the desire with which it is activated is based upon so many parameters. The strength of the stimulus, your own deprivation, your own satisfaction, what you have been thinking for the last few days, environment where you are, your own constitution, the psychosexual development and the success or non-success till you have come, whatever age you have come to, all this will determine your energy levels, age, all of that will determine the strength with which this is activated, and that will determine how much of affinity, which is a variable that I have defined for heat model, and affinity is deposited on the chakra dealing with sexuality, which in this case is a sexual center. And based upon how much of affinity is deposited, that quantum of life energy gets deflected onto that chakra. And once it is deflected, the chakra then uses the faculty elemental. And the faculty elemental gets used in two ways. First, in evaluating how much of affinity should be deposited. And then once the affinity is deposited and life energy deflects towards it, the faculty elemental is again used to plan out how to satisfy the desire. So this is the list of motivational elements.